I used to be ashamed of my past and unsure if I'd make it to where I was going. But I knew one thing was for certain. We don't end up where we're going on accident. I've also learned that we can't erase the past or hide from it, but we can learn from it and pass it on to others. So who am I? I'm the definition of a bootstrap girl. Someone who's made the hard choices to pick themselves back up and make something of themselves. And I'm not the only one. My name is Danisha. I'm a mom, a wife, a professor, advocate, queen of my own path, who's overcome abuse, foster care, homelessness, and raising 5 siblings on my own at the age of 24. And eventually I got a PhD. But something that I learned is that I don't know everything. So here on my show, we're going to be bringing in people who know the things that we don't know. Let's get in and learn on the Dr. Danisha Keating Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Danisha Keating Show. I'm super excited to have my new friend Jenny here. She is going to help us reframe some mindsets, but also learn about what the positive impact of positivity can do in our lives. So I'm going to have Jenny, I'm going to have you take it away, and then we're just going to dig in and have a conversation that's just raw about why this is so important, especially when it comes to someone who has maybe gone through trauma or is a former foster youth, where we're kind of just feeling more gravitating toward negativity. So let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself, and then we'll dig in.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So as you said, I'm Jenny Jonte. I am a high performance mindset and prosperity coach. I do primarily work with entrepreneurs and sales professionals. This information is just so important, and it can be utilized in really any aspect of any person's life, personal or professional. And yes, as you said, our mind is an incredibly powerful thing. And when we learn how to utilize it, I wouldn't even say to its fullest potential, but to even a fraction of the potential that we have, we can really create some pretty amazing.
Now we're gonna hit the hot topic, because I think when someone's like, "Oh, prosperity," or "Oh, positive thinking," it's like your life is falling apart, and people are like, "Just keep thinking positive." That's not what you're talking about, though. So can you give me a demonstration? If I were to come to you, and it's a difference between like stuff's hitting the fan and me just being negative about a situation. How would you walk me through both of those situations? Because there's very much that it's more of that things are hitting the fan and it's out of my control. But then there's stuff where it's in my control and it's my attitude. So how would you kind of help guide me? I'm an entrepreneur. I definitely need those moments of like mind shifting. So how would you walk me through those two different situations?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on the one hand side, yes, there's always going to be things that happen in life that, as you said, are out of our control. But what we can control is how we respond to it and how we react to it. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is, so we have our senses, and most of us are we've been designed, we just like live by our senses. So whatever we can see, hear, touch, taste, smell, that's what we believe is the only reality that exists. And then we allow that to affect our emotions. So if we can, things are coming in, and sure, there's not all going to be rosy, but we can choose to have more of a neutral response to it, and then decide what we want to get emotionally involved in and say, okay, this is not a result that I desire. What have I done to get to that? Or where can I change it? And then try to take back some of the control, because no matter what is happening outside of you, you are in control of the inside of you. So
I love that.
To that is huge. Yeah.
And I think that that's so big. And I keep thinking of situations where, okay, so we'll break it down a little bit for maybe someone who's listening is like, you lost your job and it had nothing to do with what you did or did not do. Like they said, you did great. We're just doing layoffs. But what you're saying is there's this moment where I could either can be destructive and start like blowing the money I have in my bank account, going and being angry at everybody else, or reacting in a way that's actually going to hurt me long term. Or what I can say is, okay, I lost my job. That really sucks. I'm feeling this way. I can't control what's happening. Okay, what can I do? Oh, I can apply to another job. I can revamp my resume, and then I can let myself feel what I'm feeling, but not run and start doing things that are actually going to hurt me long term. So it's really thinking about taking a moment to step and say, ooh, I don't have control over this. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to run down this direction that then in a week or two, I just blew through whatever savings I had. Or I start talking really horribly on the company and being like, well, they screwed up by firing me. because that's a big thing. I've seen
Yes.
this happen a
Yes.
lot. Everybody's done it. And it's like,
Oh,
uh-oh,
yeah.
no. like make sure that, it's really to keep those relationships where you people still leave the conversation where you're respected, even if you did get laid off from your job due to a mass layoff. Now,
Right.
what are some things if I were to start going down a path where I'm like, oops, I'm being very destructive, how would you walk me out of that to say you still have time to stop
Yeah.
and
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
turn
You can
around?
always change. And yes.
Yeah.
Well, and so like you were saying, I think to respond instead of react. Like very
Yes.
often we do allow ourselves to get emotionally involved right away,
Yeah.
and then we are
Yeah.
reactive. And that's when you might go, I don't know, post a bunch of negative things about the company or whatever
Yeah.
it is. But just realizing whatever you are putting out, you will be getting back, right? So if you are
Mm-hmm.
putting out a lot of negativity and, destructive ideas in regards to the company or whatever the
Mm.
situation was, you're going to end up getting more of the same back to you. So
Mm.
trying to be grateful, because who knows, it's not always easy to see in the moment, but that may have happened because there might be that is
Yeah,
waiting for
something
you to
better.
go up to. And you may have
Mm.
never even been able to do that if you had stayed in whatever the job was. So now those are not
Yes.
easy to see at the
Yes.
time. Like I've had plenty of situations in my life that were awful and I hated going
Mm.
through it. And for a long time, I resented that I had
Yeah.
to, and I regretted
Yeah.
things and held on to those feelings for so long. And only
Mm-hmm.
really I've been able to go and be like, actually grateful,
Yeah.
sucked, brought me to a completely different place that I would have never gotten to if I
Right.
hadn't gone through such awful circumstances. So
Yeah.
trying to keep that perspective that it might be something better that's going to come out of it.
Yeah. And there's like I think also too through relationships is where you're like, I'm not gonna feed into this. And I think the biggest thing within like foster youth or anyone who's dealt with maybe a bad relationship is like this,
Mm-hmm.
we know that this person is usually going to come, I like to say they're unhinged. They just come in, they're like,
Mm.
ah, and you're like, I know that that's their reaction to things. But what you said is you don't need to be led into that with people. So it's not a
Yes.
surprise when they come in and you're like, oh, so and so's angry in my family today. This is where you can say, I'm not engaging. And there was someone who
Mm-hmm.
said years ago that I heard, and I was like, oh, she said, you do not have to accept the invitation for every argument or every
Oh,
fight.
I
You
like how that's
don't
said.
have to
Yeah.
get invited. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
continue. And
I like
her son told it, and he was like 14. And he's like, Mom, you don't have to be invited to every argument. And she's like, what? I was like, oh, this
that's
is really
awesome.
good. But it reminds me
That
that
is good.
sometimes, like you said, is that we let ourselves get in these conversations. We let ourselves go further into, okay, this is what sucks. And then we're like, well, now we're spiraling. But you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I start making those posts publicly on social media being like, well, this person sucks or that person this or this person that, it makes good people who are what we're going to call in a healthy mindset go, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is a side of you I didn't know existed, or
Yeah.
this is a side of you that makes me uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Not because you're being, you're responding in the sense of like you lost your job or this relationship's hard, but in the sense of like, okay, this is going to be weeks of you being sitting in this
Mm-hmm.
mindset. I see
Mm-hmm.
this happen in a lot of relationships too within our community.
Yeah,
Is that
certainly.
we hear the word sabotage. We sabotage romantic relationships or friendships that are positive because we're not used to something going good. So how do we shift in that to say, you know what, I'm not going to continue having bad relationships or friendships based off of how
Mm-hmm.
I've responded? Like, how can we notice that we're needing to pull back and be like, this is not a you? Like I was talking to a few people a couple weeks ago where they were like, wow, I get into a negative mindset and all of a sudden I'm trying to pick a fight. So
Yeah.
where can we notice the pick a fight is starting to happen and we go, whoo, this is not you, this is me. I need a moment versus I'm going to do this until I hurt your feelings, because that's we see this happen in work. We can see this happen where it's like in relationships, friendships, all over. So how can we step back and be like, oh, I apologize, and not just be like, well, it is what it is. I had a bad day. Because I feel like that's where we normally go with
Justify your
all of it. We're
actions.
just like, it was a bad day. No. We need to
Yes.
apologize. So how do we do that? And I know you
Well,
laugh because I'm like,
apologizing
yeah,
can
we
be
all do
very
it.
hard. Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm laughing. I've been in that situation plenty of
We're like,
times.
oops.
And
Me
it's
too. It's
so
okay.
often, it's usually the people closest to us as well,
Yes.
right? Because we also care so much about like how they view us too. So I know
Yeah.
I've let people control me so much in so many different relationships, because however they respond to me or however they're talking to me, and then I internalize that as like, oh,
Mm.
I'm unworthy. I am not gonna,
Yeah.
and so I start having this horrible image of myself when it's really just, them projecting it onto me, or vice versa. That could go either
Yeah.
way. But I think one of the first things is, like you said, oh, you have to have awareness and like
Mm.
see the patterns of the actions that you tend to get into if you are upset about
Mm-hmm.
something else, right? Because if you're not even aware that you're doing it, you can't make any changes. So I think
Right.
that's always the first step, is to be aware that, oh, I have this tendency to get into this pattern, and I start talking negatively to somebody, and then I just keep going. Like I just then it turns into
Yeah.
a rant of, whatever that person
Right.
has done to me for the last 20 years, that kind of
Ugh.
thing. Because
What is it?
we
What is it
busting
called
that.
when I think someone said it's like you bring all of it to the table in a single fight, which is not it's not a fair fight when we do that. And it's so
Absolutely.
true.
Yes.
But I think you had said something, you're like, I let them do this, or they do this to me. And I think sometimes where we get into a bad mindset is like, well, you're doing this to me. And it's like, but no,
Hmm.
we're letting them, like we are
Right.
letting that
You're giving
reaction
them
of them
control. Hmm.
to do that. And we're not like, we're just like, we're out of control with this. We can't
Hmm.
do that. And as an entrepreneur, I can sit here and like I've done it where I'm like, ooh, I need a mindset shift. Like my
Hmm.
brain has got to stop, because what I would do is I would enter into rooms being like, they've invited me in, I'm doing a speaking event, and I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't belong here. And I walk like that,
Hmm.
versus coming in and saying they invited me because they saw what I had to offer, and because they know that I can speak into this. So I had to start shifting little by little, but that's a me issue. They didn't make me feel that way, but I've
Right.
used past experiences saying, when I I had to shift this, because this is what I was saying. I was saying to myself, look at the rooms I like, yeah, I got invited to this one thing, but look at the things over here I didn't get invited to. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, like that's even a shift that I have to make, to say that's not my room. Like I can't focus on what I don't have. I need to be a steward of what I have in front of me, to, like you said, to like make sure I'm doing a good job there. Because you had said like what we put out is what we attract. And so
Right.
I'm thinking through all the times where I've been like negative Nancy, and then I would attract people who were negative Nancy's. And I'm like, why are we walking around complaining about everything
Yes.
when we're like, we're
Yeah.
not trying to find the positives? And at
Hmm.
first it was really hard, because those relationships ended once I was like, okay, I don't want to speak negative anymore. Like
Mm.
I want to find the positive. And they're like, oh, no, because they wanted to stay in that. That's on them. But
Right.
every time I would go into these conversations, it was like, ooh, let's have a mindset shift here. And they're like, no, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, okay,
Yeah.
that
And
happened.
that,
So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and sometimes, yeah, as you grow, and if the people around you aren't growing and those relationships are not serving you anymore and they're more toxic than they are
Mm,
helpful, unfortunately, there may be times where you have to let some relationships go. And that can be very
yeah,
difficult, but in the end, it can be so much better. And who knows, maybe they come back later on and see, like, wow, she changed her mindset, she changed the way she was acting, she changed
right.
her attitude, and look at all these things that are beautiful happening in her
Yeah.
life. Like maybe there is something to that, and maybe they'll turn around and want to
Mm,
grow as well. But yeah, you
right.
can't do it for anybody else, right?
Yeah, I think that's what we think, is that sometimes we can be like, but I can change them. I'm like, we can't change. If we can
I
barely
know.
change ourselves. Like it's really hard to change ourselves. We can't force someone else into change, but sometimes the
Mhm.
space apart is actually what's really good, because both people are able to grow on their own. And then they
Hmm.
come back together and they're like, hey, I just had to, like, maybe we were just like bumping each other emotionally because we were trying to both grow. And there was just, we were kind of both bringing each other back to this like space of negativity because that's what we were so used to, or whatever. Maybe they don't change. But
Yeah.
when it comes to like going solo, because I know there are some former foster youth who are thinking about like starting businesses and like
Hmm.
wanting to be entrepreneurs. I personally have felt like being an entrepreneur has probably been the hardest emotional mental shift I've ever had to do, but also the biggest
Hmm.
growth I ever had to do, because I couldn't
Absolutely.
stay where I was 4 years ago and be where I'm at today if I didn't make those shifts and pivots and deal with emotions and fears and really just like, let's give it my best shot even if it doesn't work out. Like
Yeah.
I felt more, I guess, more exposed to failure because there were
Hmm.
no guardrails of someone being like, this is your job, this is how you do it, this is your paycheck every week, even when you do a bad job. Like, you're more
Yeah.
exposed as an entrepreneur. So how, if it, what would be like the starting ground? Like, okay, you're not going to be 10 years in right now if you're starting off.
Hmm.
Where can you start shifting your mindset to help you get up every day and try, and knowing that there's things that are hard coming? Where can I, like, how can I do what you were talking about, thinking through my reaction versus
Hmm.
just responding? What can I start to do
Yeah.
as like a day one entrepreneur?
I know that's tough. There's so many things. Well, one
I'm so
thing
excited.
I've heard you've said,
I know
I'm
what
sure
you're gonna
you've
say.
heard this before.
Uh-oh.
um, but the only way to fail is to
Mm,
stop, right? So
yeah.
as long as you haven't completely quit and stopped trying altogether, you have not failed. And we have to, so I talk about this all the time, especially with our kids, because we also homeschool as well. And
Okay.
so I'm like, it's okay to make mistakes. This is how you
Mistakes are
learn, right?
good.
So
Yeah.
yes, even in your business, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get everything right out the gate on day one. And you have to learn what is going to work and resonate with you the
Mm,
most, right? The hardest part, I think, is to not get overwhelmed with what everybody tells you to do.
yeah.
Because
Oh
you go to
gosh.
this person, they're like, oh, you need to be on every social media and you need to be doing this and that and this. And then this other person's like, oh, no, 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 you should be doing this strategy or you should be doing this. And it's like,
Right.
okay, so if you don't choose the way that is going to resonate with you, you're just going to struggle the whole time. So
Someone
you've
told
got,
me, they said, you're going to keep spending money on other people's advice, but you're never actually going to get anywhere because you stopped actually trying to find yours. And I was like,
yeah, I love that.
you waste so much money like buying all these courses and like trainings and all this stuff, but you never actually implement everything. So you never found your route. And I'm
Hmm.
like, dang, someone said, stop learning and start doing, and you're going to start seeing success. And I was like, dang.
Absolutely.
I
Yes,
love
you have
that.
to have action. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Um,
There's, yeah.
because yeah, and you should
Absolutely.
never, so, and I would add like never, but take action while you're learning, right? Because I mean, for
Yes.
me, like I am, I'm constantly reading new books and doing stuff like
Right.
every single
Right.
day, but I'm not like, in what do they call it? Paralysis by analysis. So I'm not like
Yes.
frozen, not doing anything. We're always still
Right.
taking action. But one of the things I think is really helpful too, if you can get a clear vision of where you're going or like what your idea is
Mm-hmm.
with the business that you want to start, but it
Right.
has to be really clear, right? So you got to really
Yeah.
spend some time like using your imagination and see what it is going to look like. And then once you have that idea, you write it out as a goal and
Yeah.
give yourself that's helpful. So,
Yeah.
it will be, I will have had 50 clients or whatever it is for your
Right.
business. Um, but the other piece that I think is so helpful is to now think, okay, if I am going to be the person who's going to meet this goal, who is that person? Who do I need to be? And what self
Mm,
image do I need to have in order to be the person who has
that's
already met
good.
this goal? So if you start
Yeah.
becoming that person before you've even achieved the goal or had the physical results, then it just helps so much
Mm,
more to keep you focused when all those
yeah.
distractions come in.
I love that, because I think that we often forget that we might not know everything starting off, but we have, like you said, we have to keep reading, we have to keep going, we have to keep implementing and trying in order to really make sure that we're not just staying stagnant. And I think when we get stagnant is usually, we hear in education, my microphone's going crazy. So I'm like trying to
Okay.
get it to stop staticking, you guys. I'm so sorry. It's like driving my brain a little nuts. In education, you might hear this if you're in like a class or something where they're like, you have to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is going to be, I can't, which really means I won't. But the growth mindset is, I can't yet. What am I going to do to help me get there? And you're saying like, before what we normally might think is, well, I can't take a client on because I'm not at level 10 and I can't help them with level 1. And it's like, well, no, what if you're at level 5 helping them at 1, but then you're still growing so that as they grow, you're still being able to help them versus 100%. What we kind of see in the entrepreneurial world is that so many people are like, I'm on level 2 and now I'm helping level 1. And then I stay at level 2 and this person's going up, and then you lose them in your business. And you're like, well, why do I keep getting clients, but I can't keep a client? And I'm like, it's because you're not challenging yourself to grow. But what I also see where we across the board, I think when we see businesses not work out, it really comes down to, I'm not willing to change things. I'm not willing to try. I'm not willing to try to fail. And then we don't know when to put something down that's not working. And then we go, well, if I stop, I'll fail. And it's like, no, you're not failing by putting something down and saying, hey, this service doesn't make sense. It's too little of a price, or it's too much of an on take that it actually is not helpful for my business. It's more hurtful for my business, or this thing I'm doing by manually scheduling everybody instead of finding an app to do it for me. These little things that, we've all done in the beginning. When we start to, I just actually did that is you were like my last person where I'm like, hey, let's manually do this through email to schedule a day instead of now I'm like, it's time to upgrade to do a link. And I was setting it up last night and I was getting so excited because it was like, oh, this is going to change how people get to schedule on times that work.
Absolutely.
They can go 3 months out and be like, oh, this works perfect with my day and my schedule, versus 6 emails back and forth where someone's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, which does happen, and I normally I haven't lost a lot of people, but it is that, oh no, I need to reschedule instead of just rescheduling. It's the back and forth of like, what day works? And it's not wrong to be like, here's a link, go ahead and schedule, and then you can reschedule and it reminds you. But there's moments where we kind of just in my own story, it's kind of like a fight or flight response where I'm just like, I'm just going, instead of being able to step back and say, what can I do to make this easier for them and myself? Right. And that's what you're talking about. Is like, we have to be able to shift and still learn and realize that that's okay. It's but putting something else that's not working down isn't saying you're failing. It is just like, is there an easier way to do it? Yeah. Why not implement it? Why not try? And I think like absolutely that's been the biggest boost for my business, is not doing as much back and forth and not doing as much manual invoices and things like that, and getting it to where someone can schedule it online and taking what people are saying into consideration to say, oh, is this really an issue where it's like confusing, or is this something that there's just this individual, and okay, how can I revamp that? How can I find the next thing to help make my job easier? And that's such a hard thing. Sometimes you need some years in, but then there's times where it's like in the beginning, why not implement things that are healthy for you to make people, but you got to still grow. And that's where, I'm starting to see a lot of, I've been as my own business owner for 4 years. I'm seeing a lot of people who start off and 6 months later, they just stopped and they were doing so good. Yeah. And they're like, it was just too much work. It was just too hard. It's like, oh, what were your processes? And they're like, oh, I was manually doing everything. I'm like, don't quit. There's things you can automate. And they're like, what? And I'm like, it is that, but it's that mind. I think what it comes down to then is that mindset shift. As an entrepreneur, like, I think I get stuck in I don't know what to do. And again, or this isn't working, I'm just going to drop it. And that's where I see a lot of businesses falling off, where people start up, they're solid for 6 months, and then they're like, this isn't for me, but they didn't ask any questions. So as someone who's starting, what are some questions, and who should they go ask? Because asking someone who is a CEO of a company that's been established for 50 years might not be as good as someone who's been an entrepreneur for 5. So what are like some of the first questions that you'd say, hey, ask these questions as you start out to grow? I actually lost you. Can you hear me? I lost you. No. Do you want to take your headphones out and see if maybe it might be those, and then just do your computer audio? It's all good. All right. Let's try that.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Let's just go ahead. It might just be the headphones. Something's going on with it.
Yeah.
It happens. It's all good.
Or something. Okay. So, all right. Well, what I was saying is, because entrepreneur is such a like vague, gross term,
Yes.
you really need to find somebody who's a little bit more close into your niche. Like, are you going
Mhm.
into coaching? Are you doing something that's purely digital? Are you doing a brick and mortar business? Are you doing like I don't know,
Right.
jewelry, whatever it might be? And then I would find people a little bit
Right.
more in that realm to use as a mentor, somebody that you respect and you know is going
Mm.
to be able to guide you a little bit better. And then also,
Yeah.
I truly think that like having somebody, and I may be a little bit partial to this, but your success is really 95% internal and 5% strategy. So you really need to get like your inside set up and taken care of, and then you will have much better success with no matter what strategy you decide to take.
Yeah. Because though it's like half the battle is our mind. And I think as
Mhm.
like even looking at the calendar, there's times that I'm like, wow, why did that take me 6 hours to do? But when I really looked at the task at hand, I only spent 2 hours on it because 4 hours was battling my mind. 4 hours was battling, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to. And it's like, hold on. Like, I bought a treadmill to put under my desk, and my desk, like, I got a desk that rose. So, like, every year I started off just on my phone and my laptop, like you normally do. And as the business has grown, I've added things like a better computer desk that raises and goes down so I could stand instead of sit all day. And then this year I got a treadmill. And so once I start to get in that mindset, what I do is I put the treadmill down and I start walking while I'm working. And I've noticed I can get something done 45 minutes. And I'm like, whoa, I went so fast. And then I'm like, oh, I walked and I moved. And all it was my brain just wasn't being able to focus. And, some people will say like, oh, that's ADHD, or that's you need to like go out and be active before. And I think really it comes down to like our body is an active thing. If we're not taking care of, like you said, the internal, like if something is disconnected from here to my hands, let me go on a walk. If I don't have a treadmill, that's okay. Do you have a bike? Do you have something where you can walk outside and get some sun? Sit outside and work on your laptop. It's a game changer when we sit back and we go, okay, what's not working and why? But I agree with you. It's such a big percentage of like internal battle first before it's actually our processes, and then the other thing is that 5% is are you throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks? And that, like, I love that you said, like, well, are you doing jewelry? Are you doing digital marketing? Are you doing coaching? Like, what are you doing? Because those are very different businesses. Those are very different processes. Those are, as a digital marketer, you're not looking for that real long-term client when it comes to relationship. You're looking at building a relationship to answer questions, but not that like you're gifting them your service to walk them through in, really detailed to the next thing. But then with jewelry, it's like you got to get out in markets, you got to get out on social media, like you want to be on all of these other places, but it's like you're not, like, yes, you're building a relationship with people, but it's a product that you have to get out. So you can't, one of the big things with product is like you can't wait 6 weeks to ship it. You want to get it out to the client as soon as possible versus someone else who's maybe you're coaching like 6 months. You're like, hey, we got to take our time to do the nitty gritty stuff first before you launch out there. But it is very different. So what would be your recommendation to someone saying, okay, I want to do this type of business, to going and finding like a mentor? Like, how would they start that conversation? What can they say? I feel like sometimes we make our like our first initial email way too long. And we're like, hey, I've been stalking you online. And it's like, Vom, like, how do we approach trying to find a mentor? Because it is very lonely as an entrepreneur.
It can be, absolutely. And again, I think it depends on where you're going, but I think you can definitely find people online that could. And the
100%.
funny thing is, like, we set up this idea in our head that like it's scary to reach out to somebody, or like, oh, what are they
Right.
gonna do? We have all these
That they're gonna be like, no, don't talk to me. And it's not. It's not that way.
And what's the worst that can happen? They say
they don't respond.
no, or they don't respond. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that wasn't the right person.
And then I move on.
So I think between, just, yeah, exactly, researching people that are in the field that you're trying to get into, and seeing who just can, shed some light, some guidance, whatever it is, because the pros are going to be happy to share, right? Because they know that there's abundance, there's no scarcity or competition. Like, they are happy to share what they do know. And then between that and if you can find a group of people and establish some type of a mastermind, I think that is the most amazing. I have a mastermind of other PGI consultants, and it's so helpful to have like-minded people that are, striving for kind of the same thing. And so you can bounce ideas off of each other. You can help if like you're getting into those little ruts or whatever it might be, or you feel a little derailed, and they can help you refocus and get back on track. And whatever it is, you just put the power of multiple minds together, and wonderful things can happen. So, and they don't all have to be in the exact same field either,
Right.
It could be just a friend, and then, another business person, or whatever it might be. They're still going to have great insights and ways that they could help you. So I think between those two ideas, and just not being afraid, like, everybody's just people, right? So again, the worst thing they're going to say is, no, I'm not able to help you at this time. Maybe they'll redirect you to somebody who could. Who knows? So
right. And I think that that's super important. So, okay, so, maybe we're afraid of rejection. How can we reframe what rejection is?
I know. I guess I don't really look at it. Everything is an opportunity for learning, right? And so that's something I've worked really hard on myself, is not having that fear of somebody rejecting me, because as long as you are confident in yourself, I think maybe that's where you have to start. Build your own confidence in knowing who you are, who you're working to become. And when somebody comes at you and doesn't want to work with you, whatever it is, it's not a personal thing. It's not an attack on you. And it's not saying they don't believe in you or that you're going to do well in your business. Maybe they truly just have too much on their plate, right? So we have to kind of look at perspective and what they might be thinking or going through as well, and not to take it as an attack on us.
Yeah.
And just know that, okay, well, maybe, and always you can ask for feedback too. Like, there's been people for podcasts, right? Like, one person got back and they're like, oh, okay, we're not gonna schedule. And I'm like, that's fine. Could you just elaborate? Like, tell me.
Yeah, give me some feedback.
And learn. And I would love to hear what the reasons are. And that's perfectly acceptable.
And they might not respond, but you're still taking a chance to like ask, because someone might respond and just be like, hey, now, like you said, now's just not the right time. Maybe we're doing a series on this like 6 weeks or something, and I can bring you in next year. Maybe it just doesn't align with what their messaging is.
Right.
But I think really, it really is a missed opportunity for that person when they say, yeah, no, but it has nothing to do with us. Like, it's with someone that I follow, she said that she put it this way. She said, rejection is not when you're an entrepreneur, it's not rejecting you, it's rejecting what you have to offer. It's not that what you have to offer isn't good enough. It just means they didn't need your offer. But that doesn't mean the next person doesn't. And I'm like, live by that. Like, I've had to tell myself, like, if they're not rejecting me, they're rejecting my offer. That's not me. But it is so hard when we start to, this is where we let our minds spiral, is when we're like, oh, it's me. It has to be me. But if we took what you did, like you said, oh, would you mind elaborating onto the why not? That maybe it was like, hey, your messaging is really unclear. You're going in 1,000 different directions. Maybe it's just like, hey, we thought we were going to have the time for this year. It's just, it's a crunch for the end of the year. I'm actually pausing the podcast for now, or we had to cancel the event due to low enrollment. It could be something completely on them. Like, hey, I had a health scare. Like, I've seen it all where it's just like, hey, it didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And that had nothing to do with me. But if I didn't ask that follow-up,
Right.
I'm never going to know. And sometimes, again, they won't answer, and that's fine. But try not to take it personally, and just really say, like, they're just rejecting the offer. They're not rejecting me as a person. They don't know me enough to say, like, oh, they're not being like, hey, I think you're horrible. Like, maybe if you got that, I'm really sorry, but maybe it's time to change your messaging. I would think that. But I know sometimes I've seen people get rejected because they're too negative. They're like, hey, like, I've watched you a little bit, and like, the reason that I'm not bringing you in is that you really focus on a lot of the negative, and it's not uplifting. It's just not uplifting. And people are leaving rooms being like, I feel like I got hit by a bus. And I'm like, oh, let's shift that conversation to say, okay, now I need to add some positivity in my stuff and not just come in with a bat and break everything and be like, cool, left you guys in a good spot. Like, it's like, actually, we meant to tell you, you left us in a very bad spot. So I think that, there was an event that I did, and I actually asked, I never do this, but I asked her, I just said, hey, I just wanted, we're doing journaling to talk through. Is there anything you want me to stay clear of? Because this is what in my head, I had this idea, and I knew the group I was working with. And I just said, is there anything you want me to stay clear of? And the person goes, actually, we would really appreciate you not having people read what you have them journal. And I said, okay. And she's like, let me elaborate to why. Because she was like, maybe you need to, and I didn't even ask why. I was like, cool, won't do it. But then when I found out, it was that people wrote some pretty hard things on paper and then were made to read, not asked, made to read it. And so it was like a few months before I had got there, and they were like, we just don't want a repeat of this. And we had some people like really hurt because they shared some things. Like, the question was, write down something you never have told anybody before that has hurt you.
Oh.
And then didn't say, like, I'm going to have you read this. So then had the room read it. And I was like, oh, as soon as that question's asked of me, I'm like, nope, I'm out. So she was just like, if you could stay clear of things like that. And I was like, I just won't even ask them to read it. And the person was so grateful that they were like, you are the only person who hasn't asked us, like, that has asked us that question, that just said, okay. And I'm like, I sat back and I'm like, how horrible is that if I had not asked that question and then I walked straight into that not knowing, and they had just forgot to tell me. So that's something you could always do too, is even if you get the yes, is to say, hey, is there anything you want me to stay clear of, or anything you want me to hit home on? That helps you make your messaging clearer and not get into weird situations like that, because sometimes that's just weird. But that was wild to me. And so I've been implementing that a lot more, to just say, hey, is there anything you want me to stay clear of, or anything you want me to hit home on? And people are like, actually, yeah, I do. I have a couple things. And even, it was weird and wild. But first, being able to say rejection is not personal. Right. And when I do get the yeses, how can I make sure that I'm getting the message they want across? Because I can come and go and it be fine. But it's like, what is the big thing you want them to know? What is something you want me to stay clear of? Like, just asking questions really helps clarify what is happening, and then allows you to grow. So I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to add? How can people find you? Where can we follow?
So I do have a LinkedIn. I should add that to my other page as well. I think the easiest place is if you go to www.bringonpossible. I have most of my links are there. So I love it.
I love it. So follow along, because this was super helpful for me. And I feel like you have so much more to offer everybody who walks through. Just to, if you are finding that you're in a hard mental space where you're just like, man, I'm waking up with negativity, I'm going to bed with negativity. Like, just know that there are ways out of it. Maybe for somebody listening that they can start on today, what if they're waking up in negativity and going to bed in negativity and just kind of feeling like nothing is working? What are some practical things that they can do to start getting to the confidence and shifting to a positive mindset? What would you recommend?
I think there's two things before bed that I kind of do a little bit of both sometimes. I'll either, recap the day and try to like look through and say, okay, what were things that went well, what didn't go well, and how can I do that next time. I also like either reread or re-listen to, so I have a self-image script. So, again, just putting that into my subconscious mind before I go to bed. So that's the type of stuff that I think about. And then, quite honestly, you probably hear this all the time, but starting your day with gratitude, honestly. Yeah. So, but it's not just grateful for the things that you currently have, but the things that are coming, they're just not here yet, right? So, like your goals. So, I always make a list of 10 things, the first thing I do in the morning, and 5 of them are things I'm grateful for currently, like in my present reality. And then 5 of them are things I'm grateful for that haven't happened yet, but are going to happen. And honestly, that vibration or that feeling of gratitude, once you get into that place, it's like magical. It's really quite, but you have to really feel it too. Like I think some people just go through the motions and they say, oh, I'm grateful for the sun, or oh, I'm grateful for this, but like really take the time to get the feeling of gratitude too, not just saying the words or just writing it down because somebody told you to, but like it's a totally different experience when you are emotionally in that feeling. And then if you start your day that way and like just trying to change your perspective throughout the day, and over time, you'll be amazed at the changes that you see in yourself.
Absolutely. There was a group of students that actually did a study on, they had basically 2 trees. One of the trees they spoke like positive things to, and the other one they spoke like negative things, bad words, all this stuff. Like they were just like, it was 2 different rooms, the tree that had like spoken negatively to and the bad words to, it was dying. And the one that was spoken life to and like positive things like around the tree, it actually flourished. So then what they did was they started talking to the other tree. It was like, this is so wild. Then they started talking to the other tree and was like positive stuff, and it started to flourish again. And they're like, but imagine what we do to ourselves. Like we are our worst critic. And like when we start to write down I was getting stuck into when I was writing the negatives down, or like, because I would like brain dump at the end of the night, I'll journal to kind of get out because I couldn't sleep. And so someone's like, journal out what's on your mind so that you can get it out. But I was always ending with the negatives versus the positives. And so my friend was like, switch that for me. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I wrote down the negatives first. And then I started getting to the positives, and it took me time to really start to like, at first it was the sun. I got to eat a really cool meal today. And then it was like, hey, there was a lot of good things that happened today. I started to want to notice those things because I was like, man, our brain naturally goes towards the negative and will remember negatives, but it's harder to remember positives. So that's where it's like, if I end it, which is like, here's some things to be grateful for today, even if it's the same thing as yesterday, end with the grateful things, because you actually go to bed on that note versus going to bed on the note of negativity. Because I'm telling you, like I could pull out 10 negative things and be like, ugh, but then I'm like, where's the positive? I'm like, nothing happened. And then if I'm sitting and reflecting, I'm like, there was a lot of positives that happened. And that's why like doing the year in review, when you sit down, like do this as a business owner too. Like I was talking to my husband. I was like, we did so much this year. And at first I was like, we did nothing. The dollar amount wasn't the same. It wasn't this. And he's like, but do you realize how much we did this year? And I'm like, yeah, we've done so much. And you sit back and you're like, that's bigger than the dollar amount. That's so much bigger than we could ever imagine. And like being able to shift onto like, okay, here's some things that could go better. Here's some things I want to fix going forward so that they're not as draining. But here's all the positives that happen, and some positives that are going to go on in 2025 because of the work we did this year. And that like you start to shift and be like, oh, it's not all going bad. But if I focus just on the negative, I'm like, I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. But it really bleeds into, like you said earlier, it bleeds into ourselves and to the people around us. And it attracts the wrong kind of people, and it attracts the wrong kind of projects that maybe we don't want to work on because we're just like, we have to take everything now versus like, no, that's not, like you said, think through what you want to offer so that you're going in that direction versus being pulled to all these sides. But it's so neat. The journaling aspect, I think, really just a fun fact. I have a psychology background, but when we write, it imprints in our brain versus just saying it. So that's why they say like make notes, put sticky notes that are in your handwriting, because it imprints on our brain and like basically seeps in more than just like, oh, da, da, da. Like that's why they're like, don't text it, say it and write it, then read it and read it again, because it's your handwriting imprinting on your brain and seeping into your brain and then seeping into the rest of who you are. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I mean, we covered so much.
We did. I love it. Makes me so happy.
Yeah, I think just being able to give yourself grace
yeah.
in every different season that you're in, and keeping you safe, and trust that whatever it is, there's a reason behind it, even if you can't see it right now, and you will get to that goal.
I love that so much. You guys make sure to follow Jeni. If you guys need more one-on-one stuff as an entrepreneur, please go to her. She's going to be like your best asset to shifting your mindset, because it is true that we sometimes need to get the right people on our team to be able to start to see the changes that we need. And who better to know how to help shift that than someone who has shifted it and done the hard work to get to that spot and really be able to understand the entrepreneur side versus just being like, hey, I just want to talk positive. But you can also go to her for that. If you guys have questions, you guys can reach out. You can leave comments. Make sure you're following, subscribe to the social media stuff, so that way you can get updates and things like that from both myself and from Jeni. We're guys so excited to have you here. Thank you so much, Jeni. This was great. Really good reminder before the end of the year, kicks off and a new year starts. So I'm so excited for people to learn from this. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.